We are here with Google's Robby Stein. Robby, what do you do for Google?
VP of Product for Google Search, working across many of our product experiences, including a lot of the new AI search experiences you heard about today.
Yes.
AI overviews, AI mode, lens, and more.
All right. Let's just jump right in.
All right, let's go.
Tell me about the big news, at least under your purview, that was announced today.
Yeah.
As it pertains to things like AI mode.
Yeah, biggest news today by far was that we are bringing AI mode out of labs, rolling out to people in the US starting today. So you'll start to see this show up as a tab in the core Google search experience and within all of the Google apps as a quick way to get access to information. And how it works is you can ask anything on your mind now, type a normal question, you can take a photo, ask a question about what you see, and Google can figure it out using advanced state-of-the-art modeling and all of the understanding of the open web and Google's knowledge systems across shopping, finance, sports, and everything else.
Okay, AI mode to me, when I saw it at least, feels like a radical redesign of Google search, possibly the most radical redesign ever since the beginning of the one box with the search and I'm feeling lucky, right? Which I think is fascinating. I'd love to know some of the backstory behind what sparked this change. Was there a risk, for example, of Google kind of being disrupted by AI as people started turning to AI chatbots?
Mm-hmm. I think the big learning for us is that we started working on AI overviews, which was the summary at the top of search for questions that are pretty specific. So if you were to ask, how do I get ketchup out of a couch?
Mm-hmm.
I have two young toddlers. You'll pretty predictably see a little AI snippet now at the top of the page that has helpful information and links to dive in. And what we found was that people wanted more of that, and they actually wanted more control over getting it, and they wanted to ask follow-up questions. They wanted deeper experiences based on that. In fact, people were actually adding AI to the end of their queries because they wanted to generate these little AI blurbs.
Did that work?
No.
Okay.
Well, it will now, because not that exact thing, but we basically decided that, wow, people are coming to Google with such different needs now. Why can't we give an experience that really lets them have full control? And for many questions where AI we think is most useful, these are typically the harder, more advanced, more specific questions people have in mind. You can just go right to AI mode now and use it. And it does represent to us like the frontier of what Google search can do and the most advanced version of what AI in search can do for you.
One thing about Google search, the traditional Google search, very powerful if you knew how to put in like the different search operators, right? And AI mode is really more about natural language. How do you see casual users versus power users, for lack of a better term, using AI mode differently?
Yeah, so I think with AI overviews, people are starting to learn that you can ask more natural language questions and get to AI at Google without AI mode even. So we are seeing more and longer questions just in search because it shows AI overviews a large percentage of the time. So I think there's a learning effect that we're seeing that's driving actually the growth that Sundar talked about today in AI overviews, which is for these kind of specific questions people have in their mind where AI overviews typically particularly show up. There's a 10% increase in searches like that this year after the release of AI overviews, which is one of the fastest growing products launched this decade. Coming into AI mode, I think there's already a belief now that there's some ability to use these longer questions, but people can take that to a much larger degree. So people are copying and pasting in whole blocks of code, of homework questions, of medical information that they're copying from some report. They're asking questions about it, and because you can have a back and forth, and you're guaranteed this AI experience, it's unlocking a lot more needs that can be solved by Google now.
What does adding AI into the search experience allow people to do now that they weren't able to do before? Like, how does that really change it?
Yeah, I'll give you a few examples. I had a discoloration of some tile in my bathroom. It was getting really weird in there. I didn't know what it was, didn't know what to do with it. It was very peculiar color. And so I took a picture of it using Lens.
Okay.
And then I asked, what is this and how do I get rid of it, basically, in natural language. And then the model was an AI mode multimodal question with image. The model did segmentation using Lens context. It figured out what the thing was, like some mold of some kind. It explained different ways that I could clean it myself, and then also found vendors in my area with phone numbers of who could professionally have it cleaned. That's like a pretty tremendous leap in what's possible on search now. You could, for example, I was comparing products that I was researching for my daughter, who's having a birthday coming up. And I wanted to put a bunch of products in. It's not clear anyone's ever compared these products before, but because an AI has kind of the ability to, from first principles, look at each underlying product, look up the product information of each of them within Google's shopping graph, and then it can make comparisons and analyze it, and then produce a table that shows the differences. It's pretty incredible. So those are all these really profoundly new things you can do, and that's why we really believe that in this new era, it's less about it's this evolution from information to intelligence, and it's really about being able to ask anything. And it's like the user is actually the biggest constraint. Like, you don't realize you can ask such hard questions.
Right.
And so the challenge to you and everyone watching is to put really specific and hard questions into Google and see what happens.
And speaking of which, you kind of led me to this next thing that I thought was incredibly impressive. I think it was called query fanout.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me more about how query fanout works. As they were presenting it today, it almost felt like you have dozens of little employees going out and doing searches for you, and then you have someone at the tail end who can kind of take everything in, collate it together, and give you a presentation based on all these searches. Like,
yeah.
That's my simplified version.
That's exactly what happens. So what happens when you put a query into AI mode, first the model starts to understand the query and it makes a plan. What's this person trying to know, and what are the things it needs to research in order to know more? And it will generate potentially dozens of other questions, and it literally uses Google search as a tool. So it's Googling, like in the background, all these questions that it thinks it needs to know about. And then each Google query is connected to the vastness of the web and Google's knowledge bases. So there's 50 billion products in the shopping graph, 250 million location places information, real lifetime data for stocks, for weather, for finance, all available into this model. And it can reason and put attention on any piece of that information that it thinks is useful. So you're booking tickets to the game, it could look up weather, it could look up reports, asking like what good seats are what the best seats are at that game. And it could look up a number of things in order to generate this response. And then the last thing it does is it takes all that info in, it generates response, but even further, it renders the design itself and outputs the visualization and all the way down to the HTML of how it shows up on the page. So if it's data, it could decide to visualize it using a charting library, or if it's products, it can make a grid, and it is like a tray or a grid of images, so you can just browse through these products.
So it's not a predetermined template for the results. It's generating the visual look as well.
Many of them are generated on the fly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
What changes with the query fanout process when you're doing deep research?
It's very little. It's a very similar overall process, but it has deeper thinking involved, and the model is given much more time to ask questions, do research, and have a multi-step experience. Because instead of waiting a few seconds, people might be willing to wait a few minutes in that case to get an expert length, thorough report. So it might do research, it might think about what it's seen, and in traditionally in AI mode, it does this too. It could do follow-up questions to learn if it feels like there's a gap in its knowledge. But if you have minutes to think, you could do that numerous times, and you can maybe search hundreds of things during that time, and then bring a very comprehensive, very deep report for someone.
Okay, switch over to live search.
Yeah.
There were so many things in this keynote that blew my mind, guys. So, live search, you can take your phone, point it at an issue, for example, a broken bike, and have Google walk you through, listen to you, and kind of be your partner in figuring something out. Again, mind-blowing, including going through an instruction manual, including going through YouTube and finding the proper video. I guess my question is, how close are we to real-time AI becoming your side-by-side assistant, or are we already there?
Yeah, I think in many ways we are already there. And I think you saw the video that showed some of this Astra capabilities that we are bringing into search. And really for what this means for most people, how to think about it is, you have this kind of world knowledge AI that knows how to research, how to use Google search, and how to access all the information within Google search's knowledge bases. That model and that knowledge base can be used in different ways. One, it can spend a lot of time thinking and generate a really long report, or you could use that same information and just talk to it live and interact with it just like you would a phone call. And in that case, the model has slight adaptation because it knows it's live, so it'll be pithier with its response, it'll be able to be interrupted, it'll obviously have a voice response by default. but it's the same thing under the hood. And so when you see an example of someone doing a science project and they're asking, hey, what do I do between these chemicals? How do I mix this with that? It's processing that information through the camera live, taking the content from context of the user in, looking up information on the web and within its knowledge base, and then giving information back to the user, all synchronously. And we think, again, it's an expansionary moment with AI. Like now you can ask all kinds of questions, get help with things using Google that you couldn't possibly foresee as possible even a couple years ago.
There was a moment in the keynote where someone was using, I believe it was live search, or using the camera, and she was like, I forget what car it was, but like referred to as a sports car, and it was a garbage truck.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And it corrected her.
Yeah.
How does live search decide or understand what it's seeing, and how confident is it when it's explaining things back to you based on what it's seeing?
Well, the models are developed with multimodality pretty natively. So as they're trained and developed, it sees images and understands them pretty intuitively. And so I think in that example, the model just had a strong kind of prediction of what that thing was and felt confident about it, and so made a correction there. And that's true generally for world information, which is being enhanced even further with the latest research from Gemini on the modeling side. But I think the other part of which is really special is that within Google Search, we have Lens, and Lens has this pretty amazing ability to understand objects within an image. So if you were to take a photo of this space and say, I really like the pattern on this floor, there'd be segmentation of this experience, or maybe like this carpet. It would segment it. It would be able to pull out, just make a distinction between the carpet and the floor and the wall, and then would focus on that element, knowing that they can be segmented out. And then it can ask follow-up questions about that thing using the information in the photo itself. So it could find similar carpets based off of the digital representation of this carpet. So you can do pretty powerful visual understanding now, and that's just going to be part of everyday life with AI.
Insane. You also announced personal context in AI mode. Where it can reference your past searches and other Google apps, starting with Gmail, to help answer questions. We saw Apple famously, or maybe infamously, crash and burn around this similar feature. You guys said it's coming this summer. How will this work in AI mode, and how does Google make sure you get this right as it pertains to finding the right information? And also, I think what a lot of people might be wondering also is about privacy.
Yeah. So first of all, the experience is really focused on helping with these classic questions that are about taste, personal preferences, and interests. So whether it's about what movie should I watch, what shoes should I buy, fashion, decision, cars to purchase, things to do, they really occupy this kind of area around personal taste and interest. It's not, we don't believe you need to personalize every piece of information, particularly facts and key pieces of information. So that's the first thing. And then the approach is to use the information that's most useful from your search history. So whether that's queries or from past AI mode interactions. And then the idea is that if you're searching for sushi restaurants all the time, the model can learn pretty quickly, okay, this person really likes sushi.
Right.
And when you're applying it to the scope of recommendations, that's a pretty confident thing that you love sushi. The model knows that we're really focused on recommendations to personalize to start, and it's gonna, if you ask for where to go for a date night, you might see sushi at the top, and you'll feel like that's pretty magical. Whereas, like, let's say you're just learning about some new kind of restaurant, and you just search in, you Google something like, I don't know, Georgian food, and like you did it once. Like the model should then realize, okay, like a one-off search doesn't mean just because technically it's about food, that's like all you should ever see again, right? So it kind of learns these nuances and learns when to apply these nuances. And then with Gmail, that's an opt-in experience to connect Gmail to make them even more enhanced, because obviously if Google Search had better familiarity with the places you actually book and your itineraries and where you go, it could be even more helpful. And for all of this, it can all be turned off. It's all subject to the standard, personalization and web history policies and controls and settings that people have.
Okay. Then we have shopping assistance.
Yes.
Which includes trying on clothing while shopping with just a photo, which sounds wild. I mean, we saw a demo and it worked, but it sounds absolutely wild. Tell me more about this and how accurate it is. People have different skin tones, people have different body types. Does this work across the board?
Yeah, I mean, it was designed with multiple body types in mind. for this exact purpose. And I think the evolution was that there were a bunch of launches around models that you could pick that were like you. And so a lot of the technology was being created to take a 2D or a representation of clothing and put it onto a person. And then the next innovation was doing it for you specifically. And really the focus is around the kind of just general look of it. But I think you can look for a lot more enhancements to come from that team.
Okay. AI mode can do tasks, interpret visuals, shop, as we talked about, even make reservations. Why launch this in search as opposed to, say, the Gemini app? Why launch it in search itself? Is search kind of becoming the new OS in a way?
Well, first of all, a lot of these are very underlying capabilities that have been breakthroughs from Gemini and the Gemini modeling team. So, for example, we talked about Project Mariner, which was browser actions last year, Project Astra, deep research. These are all foundational. And so the way we think about it is we have two different kinds of products. One is it's an AI search experience. The other is going to become a universal assistant, right? But there's some shared technologies underneath. I think how they're applied will be different. And I think that's really how to think about it overall. I think for us, for search, I mean, there's billions of people use search and rely on it. And so the intent is just to make it easy for them to use AI to get the tasks done that they're already coming to search for today. And that's really why we built AI mode and AI overviews.
One of Google's original mantras was follow the user.
Yes.
How does this, what I think, and I think many people agree, is a monumental shift in search, align with that mission?
Well, if you think about what we're trying to do here, it's really a reaction to what we're seeing growing on search. So people want to ask questions naturally. They want to be able to communicate in ways that feel really natural to them. They're used to communicating and asking questions over multimodality, over voice, over photos, over videos, over text. And there's an expectation that information can be fairly immediate. And so I think if those are the principles and what we see in the usage and the data and when we talk to people, we're building products. And I think that's why you're seeing a whole product experience in AI mode and with AI overviews as a quick kind of preview becoming a huge part of what we do in search. And so it's in that exact mentality. And then figuring out, hey, later if this works, we think advertising, we think other things can be great parts of these experiences. We wouldn't start there. We start with the user.
Yep. Okay. Obviously, big day, Google I/O. You revealed a bunch of things that are under the AI mode feature set. For you personally, what were you most excited for people to either learn about or see as a new feature? And I know I'm making you choose between all your darlings here, but I'm just curious.
I think for most people, it's probably just AI mode. I know it's a little bit of a cop-out answer, but I think for the average person, they probably didn't follow the labs news and the information. And the fact that you can just ask any question in search, go have follow-ups with it, and get an AI-led experience with the most powerful models using all of Google Search's knowledge and of the web is pretty awesome. And I'm just excited to see people, like, even on social media before, to see people's reactions. That's been very special just to see that you could do this. Wow. I'd say the next one is just how it integrates all of the rich information available on the web and in Google into one view. So I think it's really cool that you can search for products. If you look for headphones, you'll actually see a tray of headphones, and you can click on a headphone and have a panel come over it right in line, where you can just browse all of the images, change the colors, look at the prices, see where to buy it at every merchant, see reviews, and then links to go purchase it. Like all in one AI experience. I think that is enormously helpful. And I think many people don't realize that that's available today. And I'm excited for people to start discovering those kinds of things. And one for the future, I think. I'm pretty excited about what this agentic future holds. Because really being able to take actions for people and save people a ton of time, I think is a really unique thing that we can do, because you're already many people go to Google they're not looking for information, they're looking to get something done. You're looking up times because you ultimately want to book the thing. Right? And so I think there's an opportunity just to be a lot more helpful for people. And I think people can start to see, when you combine a model that can plan and think with information that it can research, with then the doing at the end, that's pretty incredible that an AI system could basically do that whole journey, which is something that a person would have to spend hours potentially doing just a year ago.
Right, okay. Based on everything we just talked about, is the traditional search box irrelevant, or does that go away? Like,
So the search box, it's interesting. People come to search for a huge variety of things, and we don't see that changing.
Okay.
So like someone just wants to type in a closing business time. They want to type in a new artist, just a single name. You heard a celebrity name, let's say. Oh yeah, they're a great actor. You just type in the person's name. In many cases, what we show in search is absolutely the best thing to show for that question. You get a visualization, you see photos of the person, you get to see recent posts from that person, you get to see news articles from them, you see their official website, you can look at their music. I think where AI mode really shines is when people are looking for these really specific things. And that's where we've seen a lot of the growth just in search.
Yeah.
Because you can do so much more for people that allows them to ask all these crazy questions, and that product is really designed for that purpose. I think people are going to use them in tandem, and we're going to obviously bring that into search as we can. So like, user don't have to know which of these to use. They'll just put something into Google. If there's helpful AI that can help you, you'll see it show up. And if there isn't, you'll get this visual page. I don't know if you've seen, like, if you search for movies, TV shows, entities, places, it's like a big, rich experience. Like, that's actually a great experience. If I just type a celebrity's name into AI mode and you get a single sentence description, that's not necessarily the best experience. And so I think you realize just how much people come to Google for. And that's why we view this as more of the frontier of search for being able to answer some of the hardest things versus a full-on replacement.
And that is it for this edition of Geared Up. Thank you so much for listening. Of course, you can catch John and I on YouTube. I'm at youtube.com/GearLive, and John is at youtube.com/John4Lakers. Feel free to head over and subscribe to our channels to stay up to date on all the latest tech. Speaking of subscribing, you can subscribe to Geared Up in your favorite podcast app if you haven't done so already. Just search Geared Up, that's 2 words, not one, in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pocket Casts, Overcast, or really wherever you choose to listen. If you like what we do, please consider leaving us a rating and review. It really helps other people find the show. Geared Up is a Gear Live podcast, and you can see more from us at gearlive.com. Thank you so much for listening. For John Rettinger, I'm Andrew Edwards, and we'll catch you in the next episode.